What we do here is go back.
Hey everyone, welcome to part 3 of School X A Year in Review. So all I've really got to say before the actual main video starts is, if you haven't seen the previous 2 parts, I recommend you do that first. There's links to both of those in the description. And since that's it, yeah, let's just get straight on with it. So, GCSE Options. They were a little bit of a mess. Normally, it would just be Year 9s picking their options around March. But instead, for whatever reason, probably because some intelligent specimen decided that the start of Year 9 is when to begin GCSEs instead of after you pick your options, they made both the Year 8s and the Year 9s pick their options at the same time. My sister also vaguely remembers having to pick her options twice for some reason. Oh, I don't know why that happened. So having to pick your options a year earlier than normal and possibly having to do so twice, that's kind of bad enough, but there's more to it. On gov.uk it states there are 6 compulsory subjects for GCSE students. This is part of the national curriculum. All schools have to make all their students take these 6 subjects at GCSE level. English, Maths, Science, PE, Citizenship and IT. Now, IT is the most notable one here because School X put IT down as an option rather than making it compulsory. They did make something else compulsory in its place. They had to pick one or more of history, geography or French. Now, you could say, well, School X, they're an academy. Academies don't have to follow the national curriculum, so they don't have to follow the rule of these 6 subjects being compulsory. But my counter to that would be, just acknowledge how important IT is in the real world. School as a whole is supposed to be about preparing students for the real world. And again, that's something that's not done well across the planet, but that's a topic for another day. IT is very important in the real world today. Society is becoming more and more reliant on technology, primarily with phones and computers. Of course, you've got people gaming a lot, cars are becoming more electronic, and technology is becoming increasingly prominent in things like medical care. And there's so many other things technology is used for in day-to-day life. It really would be beneficial for students to have at least a basic knowledge and understanding of how to use this technology. Even if the GCSE course would just be repeating stuff that was taught over the previous few years, much like my GCSE IT course was, that'd be better than nothing. And they definitely have the lessons available to do this in the timetable. School A managed it fine with their own timetable of only 5 lessons, and now School X have a 6th lesson in the day and possibly a 7th coming in. So they definitely have the lessons available to do it. If they haven't done it because there's a problem with how many teachers they have and are able to teach it, no reason why they can't hire a teacher, or maybe do what they promised and bring over one of the teachers from the other sites. And again, this is something that School A had to do. Around the start of 2016, my IT teacher left, and she was gone for about 6 months. But after she left, we always had a substitute teacher there. Admittedly, yes, the lessons still weren't handled very well because we didn't get clear instructions all the time and not everybody knew what they were doing, but it's still better than nothing. So School X, get IT into the compulsory courses, and if you need to, hire a teacher or 2 for the job. So, the mock exams. For some reason, School X decided to hold those in the sports hall rather than the main hall, which is where they should have been. With School A, the mock exams were held in exactly the same way as the real exams. So you get your timetable, then when the actual exam comes around, you'd queue up in the canteen, alphabetical order by last name, but your name would be called, you'd go in, they'd direct you to your seat, then you'd get the exam, and then you'd begin. Do the exam, then they'd send you out row by row, and then that'd be that. School X changed this in more ways than one, and I don't know why they did this. So, like I said, they held it in the sports hall instead of the main hall, but before they even started, they got the timetables wrong. Timetables they handed out had the wrong dates and the wrong times, and they didn't issue that many corrected versions. So, good job to start with. That's a brilliant job. Then when it came to lining up, instead of lining up in the canteen, they had to line up on the the playground. Their name would be called and then they'd have to go all the way around into the PE block and take the seat in the sports hall. Having to wait outside wasn't exactly the best idea back in February, and it was about 3 degrees before the snow came in. Then when it comes to where you leave your bags, with School A you leave them in the canteen, with School X you leave them by the side of the sports hall instead. I suppose that's a slight improvement, because at least that way you know nobody's going through your bags, because they're always by the side, so somebody is keeping an eye on them. Then there's the temperature of the room. With the main hall, it was fairly consistent. They kept it warm when it was cold outside. They did manage to keep it at least somewhat cool when it was warm outside. But the sports hall is pretty much always cold all year round. It's always much colder than the main hall. There's also not a clock in the sports hall. Now, instead of doing something that would be at least somewhat sensible, buying a new clock and getting it nailed into the wall and then putting like a plastic protective casing over it, School X came up with possibly the best DIY solution to that I think I've ever heard in my life. So they went into the main hall and they took one of the clocks from there. They then hung that clock on a badminton net support and put that at the front of the sports hall. I really shouldn't be finding that as funny as it is. Now, the mocks happen to be taking place in February and going into March. I think some of them might have been delayed by the snowstorm. You may remember in the odd construction choices bit, I said it was around March when they had the buckets out in the gym catching water from the leaky roof. There were a couple of mocks happening around that same time. So that might explain why they were doing PE in the gym while the buckets were still out, because the sports hall was being used for the mock exams instead. The mocks also resulted in the students having to do PE outside in the freezing cold, or in the main hall. So they were doing the mock exams in the sports hall, and they were doing PE in the main hall. Again, I don't know what School X were thinking with that. I also don't think it was just the mocks where this was happening, because for some reason, the actual real English Literature GCSE exam, that was held in the sports hall as well. The other real exams, I don't know for sure if any of those were also in the sports hall. But either way, at least the English Literature exam was. And that led to another problem, which I'm going to discuss later in the video. So my last major point for this video, this is more going to be a collection of all these small incidents and the dumb moments that don't really fit into any of the previous points that I've made. But it just further showcases the stupidity and the disorganisation of School X. Okay, so you know how the sites are called the Upper and Lower Campus? Believe it or not, that wasn't their original names. They were originally called the North and South Campus, but midway through the year, School X changed it to Upper and Lower. What was wrong with the original names? What prompted you to change it during the middle of the school year? Why didn't you make any sort of official statement about it? Picked one name and stuck with it, at least until the end of the year? I'd say School X are actually wasting quite a lot of paper. And I'm not just talking about the planner having extra pages that it really doesn't need. I'm talking about letters that they send home to parents. You see, School A had this thing called parent mail. It was basically just a fancy email, and it was specifically for the school to send letters home to parents, with the intention of making sure parents actually got the letters, and to make sure students weren't forgetting or deliberately not giving their parents letters. And because it was digital, it saved quite a lot of paper and helped to look after the environment a bit. Of course, not all parents signed up to parent mail. Those parents were sent physical copies of letters. But it was still a system that worked really well. Because I know if my parents didn't sign up for parent mail, they probably would have gotten a lot less letters from school because I would have forgotten about most of them. School X completely abandoned parent mail. They only send physical copies of letters home. And their way of verifying that parents actually read the letters, by having this page in the planner. You're supposed to write the date of when you get the letter, what the letter's about, and then your parent is supposed to sign it to say they've seen it. School X really could save so much paper and ink if they brought parent mail back. In December, we got an article in the local paper. It was saying School X weren't allowing community use of the School A facilities. For those who don't know, community use is basically where you allow like outside groups or clubs to basically rent and use the School A facilities. That's mostly for like events or gatherings. An example given in the article was a radio control car club. Back with School A, they were allowed to use the main hall for Friday evenings for their meetings. School X weren't allowing them to use it at all. Another example is some sports teams. Netball and basketball teams were basically kicked out. And the town council brought this issue up, with one councillor saying it could have deleterious effects on community cohesion. In other words, it's not a good thing. The CEO of School X responded to this. In short, he said their priority is providing a quality education. They do have community use as long as it's cost effective, and as long as it doesn't impact student resources. They have an agreement with a charity status dog club, which is at no cost to the academy. They ended the car club's contract for financial reasons, but thankfully they didn't charge the car club for the use at the time. And he gave an open invitation to the council to visit School A to see the positive investments made in the interest of students? My response to your response, CEO: 1. Your education is not quality at all. Secondly, I'm not sure the whole impact on student resources thing is a valid excuse of yours. I mean, when I hear student resources, the first thing I think of is like textbooks or glue sticks, pens, pencils, rulers, the sorts of things you'd find in a classroom. For the most part, what use would like a car club or a dog club have for stuff like that? I mean, it could mean maybe the sports teams having to use the sporting equipment, like having to borrow rackets or sports balls or having to set up the nets. But I honestly don't see that as a good enough reason to straight up deny community use. Thirdly, what do you mean by financial reasons with the car club? Do you mean that you or the car club just couldn't keep paying for the contract that you had? Because by the looks of it, it looks like either your money's all gone to waste, or you raised the cost for the car club and they just couldn't keep paying it. I will add here, the local paper released a follow-up article in January. In short, the school ex-CEO had set up a meeting with the town council where they discussed community use. But apparently, according to the CEO, the meeting couldn't be an open session because they were going to be discussing financial issues, including the staff remuneration required for community use. So about a month after the controversy, they did finally set up a meeting, but we don't know the details of that meeting because it happened in private, and it happened in private because they were discussing the money involved, which included the staff remuneration or the pay required for it. Okay, so based on the information from both of the articles, this is what I think might have happened. School X said no to community use because they didn't want to have to pay a staff member extra to maintain the community use. Maybe they just didn't want to increase the staff members' pay, or maybe they just didn't have the funding available for it. So to try and help cover the cost, they raised the cost of community use, but the clubs just couldn't afford it, and they felt as though they'd basically been forced out. But hey, that's just a theory. So if somebody from School X is able to clear this up a bit more, then that'd be great. Now, with School A, on the last day of term before the Christmas holidays, and on uniform day, we got to wear Christmas jumpers like these. That last day was also a half day. So basically you just had the first 2 lessons. Those were usually spent like watching a movie or colouring by numbers or something along those lines. Then you'd have break, then you'd be waiting around with your tutor instead of going to lesson 3, and then you'd go home at lunchtime. Those days were a nice way to have a little bit of Christmas fun before breaking up for the holidays. Of course, School X went and ruined it. Instead of making the last day a half day, they made it a full normal day. So instead of 3 lessons and going home at lunch, they made it all 6 lessons going home at normal home time. That just killed the fun. Do they just hate students that much? They did still allow the students to wear Christmas jumpers though, but because they believe non-uniform is uneducational, your Christmas jumper had to be over the top of your normal uniform. Most of the students wore Christmas jumpers before this. Last year there were about 10 to 20 students maybe, most of them being year 7s, who actually wore Christmas jumpers. On January the 27th, School X handed out their annual reports. Even though the Home Academy Agreement says that they have regular parents' evenings and reports, and they only had 1 of each, the main thing I had an issue with this particular report was a comment that was made about my sister's attendance. It was 95% at the time. School X's comment said that it could be improved. And what ticks me off about that is School X were the ones who made it worse than it could have been. Up to that point, she'd only had a total of 6 days off. All 6 of those days, she was off for illness. It was a Friday and then a full week. Now, we chose to keep her at home on the Friday and then the Monday and the Tuesday. We sent her back into school on the Wednesday. But in her first lesson that day, she was sent back home with the recommendation she take the rest of the week off. So that's exactly what we did. She wasn't even that bad on the Wednesday. She could have remained at school that day. She could have gone back on the Thursday or Friday perfectly fine. But they told us to keep her home, so we did. If they didn't send her home, her attendance would have been higher than 95%. And then they probably wouldn't have left a comment saying that it could be improved. So in short, they wanted her attendance to be better when they are the ones who made it worse. This is probably one of my smallest points, but it's just something I found a little bit interesting. On February the 8th, May the 28th and July the 6th, I made notes on what all these School X-owned schools were rated on Google. And I noticed a bit of a trend. Here the ratings are, keep in mind all of these are out of 5. Notice how most of them have actually gone down, particularly with schools A and B. Out of all of these, the only one that went up was School C, but they went back down again. So when School X say they improve the schools, it seems like the general public don't agree. So, there's a sign at the School B site. It's next to this little driveway and it directs people towards the visitors entrance for the school. Of course, School X modified the design of the sign quite heavily when they took over. Now, neither sign is perfect, but let me just show you them. Firstly, here's a picture from Google Street View in June 2017. This is what the driveway looks like. The actual sign is located in the bush on the left. Make sure you take a good look at the surrounding area. Now, here's a close-up of the sign. It's not perfect. It indicates the visitor's entrance is down that driveway when it's actually a little bit further up the road. But I'd say the School X design is slightly worse. It looks like something that belongs in the You Had One Job Twitter account. Bear in mind the sign is in the exact same position. Here's a picture of the sign I took in January 2018. Yeah, sorry that the picture's dark and there's the flash on. I took that about 7:10 in the morning on the way to the bus station for college. As you can see, School X put their logos up in the top corners, which, that's fine I guess. But they added staff entrance only, and they barely changed the visitors entrance part. So this sign makes it look like both the visitors entrance and the staff only entrance are down that driveway. Which obviously they aren't. That's only the staff entrance down that driveway now. You would have thought somebody would have noticed this minor design flaw, but apparently not. And there'd be a way to get around this minor design flaw, change the design of the sign, or put the visitors entrance part on that hill on the other side of the driveway. As a bonus, just look at the picture again. If you didn't notice, the bottom corner of the sign is actually dented and bent quite badly. Remember, School B had a reputation as one of the 400 worst schools in the country. Trust me, it definitely deserved that spot. But to my knowledge, that side wasn't dented for years, and the School X one was dented after only 6 months at most. Naturally, they did take the sign down to fix the dent, but they only did that in March. So they had a dented sign on display for about 2 months. Surely it can't have taken them that long to realise the sign was dented and bent like that. And then when did they get it put back up? In May, of course. So it took them 2 months to actually get it taken down, and then another 2 months to get it put back up fixed. I googled how long it would take to fix a dented sign, and it's something that would take a few hours to a few days. I'm assuming based on how the search result is written, they're talking more about cars than a sign. And I'm guessing trying to fix a dent on a car is going to be a lot more of a pain than trying to fix a dent on a sign. So either whoever was fixing the sign was super lazy, or School X was super lazy and slow with getting it put back up. Or maybe even super slow with getting it sent off for repair. Here's a very, very small point. There's one teacher who was extremely passionate about students walking on one particular bit of grass. That bit of grass is where the remembrance tree was. She spent most of her lunchtimes telling students, do not walk on the grass. But she did this while she herself was stood on the grass. A little bit hypocritical if you ask me. She could have easily just stood on the path that goes all the way around that bit of grass. Or maybe sat on the remembrance bench that's there. But no, she tells people don't walk on the grass while she herself is stood on the grass. Various letters have been sent home over the last year, but there are two that really stand out to me for the mistakes on them. Firstly, there was a letter from November which discussed the new uniform. The actual letter itself was fine, except for the dates that were provided on it. Thursday the 7th of December and Friday the 9th of December. I don't think numbers go 7, 9, 8, School X. Then shortly into the start of the summer holiday, they sent out a letter regarding free school meals and the new system they've got in place for that, which is something to do with getting your fingerprints scanned and then using that to pay for your food or something along those lines. But it's who this particular letter was addressed to. It doesn't say Mr. and Mrs, it says Mr. and Mr. twice. So technically this letter was not sent to my mum and dad, it was sent to my dad and me. I don't know if this is an error that made its way into other letters, but good going, School X, good going. How did nobody notice these errors before printing off probably hundreds of copies? Surely you would have got someone to proofread it, but if you did, apparently they didn't do a good enough job of it. Back in April, School X changed the School A computer operating system. It previously was Windows 10. School X downgraded it to Windows 7. I shouldn't need to explain how downgrading from Windows 10 to Windows 7 is not the smartest idea. But this downgrade also changed everybody's usernames and passwords for some reason. So a lot of the students weren't particularly happy that they had to create a new username and come up with a new password. And at the time, School X claimed that it was because they wanted the system to be faster. There wasn't really too much of a difference on some of the new computers they bought, but a lot of the old ones at least, yeah, it definitely wasn't faster. And then on May the 9th, School X announced that in September, they were going to revert back to Windows 10 to sync up some sort of a network across both schools A and B. I'm recording this about a week into the start of the new year, and so far from what we can tell, the synced up system thing does seem to work, because my sister and her friends who are at School A have been moved to School B. They still have all their work from School A on the School B computers. The only problem is, now it takes forever for them to log on. He's been there about 3 or 4 times so far. All of those times, it took the teacher a couple of seconds to log on, but it took the students about 20 minutes for them to log on. That's how slow they can be. In regards to the plans for the synced up network, when did you originally decide for this to be a thing? Surely if you planned it before you reverted everything from Windows 10 to Windows 7, if that was your intention to bring in this synced up network at the time, surely you would have run some sort of a test on Windows 7 first, before downgrading all the school's computers to Windows 7. And also, after probably realising this synced up network won't work on Windows 7, why didn't you put it back up to Windows 10 straight away? Why did you have to wait until the start of the next year to get it put back up to Windows 10? And why not mention any of this to any students before actually carrying this plan out? On April 30th, a girl got her coat confiscated. Why was it confiscated? We have no idea. She got the coat back the next day with no explanation why it was taken in the first place. 2 best theories I've got, either lost property or the coat's not the right colour. But it can't be because the teacher thought it was lost property, because the girl was stood next to the coat while she had it lying down on the bench next to her. Surely it's not because of the colour, because even though the uniform code does state that it's only supposed to be a plain black coat, this particular coat was khaki. But there's loads more students that don't have black coats. A lot of them also have khaki coats, not just this one student, but this is the only instance I know of a coat being confiscated. So surely if that teacher was trying to enforce the only plain black coats rule, surely they'd have to confiscate about 100 other coats. But this is the only incident I know of. Could somebody at School X please explain that to me, please?
Can you stop going? Because everyone's gonna go f***ing home!
Around the end of April and beginning of May, there were some students from both Town Academy sites. After they finished at school, they went over to the local grammar school. Most of them were just waiting for the friends. When their friends turned up, they left. But there were others who were verbally abusing the staff and the students. And there was one student who went as far as to throw a stone at the back of a staff member's head before they ran away. Now, I know which student is responsible for throwing the stone. And the only reason I know that is because he was dumb enough to brag about it out loud in the middle of a French lesson. But what intrigues me the most about this particular situation is School X's response. Town Academy principal's statement was fairly standard for situations like this, saying things like they were working closely with the grammar school staff, and if there's any evidence of Town Academy students misbehaving, they'd be dealt with the discipline policy. That's a fairly standard response. But then an unnamed spokesperson from School X also added in their own comment. They said there's no evidence of Town Academy students being involved. That is quite clearly not the case. Town Academy students are known to be at those gates. The description the guy who got hit by the stone gave of the culprit matches the description of the idiot who bragged about throwing the stone in his French lesson. I should also probably add at this point, to my knowledge, the guy who bragged about throwing the stone at the staff member never got punished for it. Despite the fact that he basically confessed to it in the middle of a class, no one noticed or nobody bothered to report it, meaning the student who threw the stone at the back of the staff member's head got away scot-free. I'm sure School X know full well who threw the stone. If they don't, how they don't know that is beyond me. If they do know, why he never got punished is also beyond me. But for me it's that if there's any evidence of Town Academy students misbehaving, along with the, oh, there's no evidence of them misbehaving, when you put those two statements together, along with the fact that the student involved didn't even seem to get any punishment, it makes it seem like if School X do know who's responsible, there's no way they don't know it was Town Academy students being involved. It looks like they'd rather just lie and say, oh, we have no involvement in this whatsoever. Seems like they'd just rather say that than just admit the truth. School X, you really should acknowledge if you know who's responsible or not. And given how much evidence there is to showcase who is responsible, you must know who was responsible for this. You need to acknowledge you know who's responsible and that you're going to deal with it. So, let's talk about the lockers briefly. Something that School A did that School X also do. You have to pay £5 if you want a locker. So at the start of the year you go to reception, you pay £5 and you get a locker key. Then at the end of the year you could return the key to reception and you get your £5 back. I didn't have a locker personally, but my sister did. She paid £5 for the locker at the start of the year, and then on July 13th she went to return the key for the end of the year. She gave the key back, but she was told she'd be paid the £5 the following week. And when she first told me that, I was like, okay, probably should have given it back immediately, but just give them the last week of term and then just see if they go through with it. The last day of term came around, that being July the 20th. Still, she had not been refunded. So before leaving, she stopped off at reception and she asked why hadn't she been refunded yet. She was told the refund would be posted out. Now, as of this recording, which is about 5 to 6 on the 10th of September, that refund has still not come through. Whether that's down to School X failing or the Postal Service failing, I don't know. It's coming up to 2 months now and they still haven't refunded a student £5. It really shouldn't be that difficult for them to refund one student £5. When they're not refunding students like this, it kind of makes it look like they're scamming them. So School X, if you don't want to look like scam artists, I suggest you get the £5 sent back to us. Thanks.
Hey, so Future Me's just going to have to jump in at this point and just provide 2 major updates to this situation. Firstly, on October the 5th, after my dad picked me up from college, he stopped by School A to ask about the locker refunds. There were a few things I took away from that trip, but in short, the receptionist told us basically that because of how the Multi-Academy Trust works, they've more or less had to send a list of all the students who need refunding to School X itself, and they've needed to verify and approve it basically. You'd imagine surely they would have sent this list off around July, you know, when everybody was asking for refunds. And if that's the case, they must have only got it back around the end of September, beginning of October. So School X are just being really slow. But the receptionist said they were in the process of sorting it out and they were hoping to have everybody refunded by half term at the latest. Half term starting on October 19th. Doesn't change or excuse the fact that it's still taken them over 3 months to refund everybody £5. So my thoughts at the end of that trip were, okay, so that's a very terrible excuse for why it's taken so long, but if everybody's going to be refunded by half term, fine. But then October the 15th rolls around, that's the day I'm recording this particular bit on, and about half an hour ago, a letter came through the post from Town Academy's principal. In short, he said they can't refund everybody because the locker money was being held by the Academy's Enterprise Trust, and School X don't have access to that money. As a gesture of goodwill from the School X Multi-Academy Trust, the students who need refunding can go to reception to collect a £5 Amazon gift card as compensation. So firstly, that doesn't match up at all with what the receptionist told us. And secondly, if you can spend £5 on Amazon gift cards for everybody, this is £5 off School X's own money, there's no reason why they can't just send everybody a £5 note. They clearly have the money to do it, but instead of sending everybody £5 notes through the post with a letter saying, sorry it's taken so long, they've just sent a letter saying, sorry it's taken so long, this is our totally legit reason why, but as compensation, you can come and collect a £5 Amazon gift card. So somebody is lying here. I don't know whether it's the receptionist or the principal, but somebody seems to be lying. Because these stories don't match up at all. And based on the fact that School X did try and pass the blame of all the planet errors onto the printing company, something tells me that this letter from the principal is him trying to pass the blame on for School X's mess-ups to the Academy's Enterprise Trust this time. Though if you can't tell, I'm more inclined to believe the receptionist story here. Seems more likely to me that School X have just taken forever to get everything approved. And then the principal's official explanation is just trying to pass all the blame off onto the Academy's Enterprise Trust for it taking forever. So, yeah, School X, you're just idiots.
Around early to mid-May, School X announced that they weren't going to be able to run the 6th form for Town Academy in the 2018-19 school year, and that's because there weren't enough people who applied to it. I can't imagine why. They said that because there were so few people applying, it wouldn't be a good experience for the students, and it wouldn't be financially viable. And I suppose that's fair enough. They then took the chance to promote their own 6th form, of course. They said they'd be willing to transfer Town Academy students to their own 6th form, and they bragged about a free bus service. Now, the District Council called them out on this. They urged School X to rethink their decision, mainly pointing out the negative impact it would have on the students, but School X stuck with their decision to keep the 6th form closed. Where it gets even more interesting is in the letter that the council sent out. They said School X should work more effectively with local partners in advance of any future restructuring proposals, and there seems to have been very little consultation in relation to these proposals. So by the sounds of it, they didn't get any words of advice from the county council regarding their choice with the 6th form. So they didn't talk to the council, but just went ahead with their decision anyway. They really should have discussed this with the council, and also probably the students who applied, before announcing the closure. Reschedule rescheduling lessons. That's something that does inevitably end up happening throughout the year. But I've got at least 4 incidents where the rescheduling was handled so horribly. Number 1. On May the 17th, the entire Year 10 science class failed a chemistry test. And I do mean all of them. 100% of them failed the test. The teacher wasn't happy about this. He told the class they'd be retaking the test at lunchtime on May the 22nd. He didn't actually go over the test to cover what the students mostly got wrong. He didn't tell them what the pass mark actually was. He didn't tell them what would happen if they actually failed the test a second time. And on top of that, they were supposed to be doing a completely different test that day. So, May the 22nd rolls around, and at lunchtime most of the group turn up for the retake, and they find out it's been rescheduled to after half term. Probably should have got the word out before the students turned up for the test. Number 2, this one relates a little bit to the mock exams segment. Remember I mentioned how for some reason the actual English Literature GCSE exam was being held in the sports hall rather than the main hall? Year 10 class had PE at the same time as that exam, and they were supposed to be in the sports hall. But obviously, because there was an exam going on, they couldn't be in the sports hall. They also couldn't go into the gym because the noise they'd be making in the gym would be heard in the sports hall and that would be distracting the students taking the exam there. So that meant they had to find a different room to do PE in. The weather was nice that day, they could have easily just gone outside and done PE out there. But no, apparently they had to do PE indoors that day. School X had been aware of this situation. They'd been trying to find a new room for the students to do PE in since the previous night, but somehow they failed to do so. After the students turned up for the lesson and got changed, they then spent another 10 minutes just waiting around while the teacher found a new room for them to go in. Guess what room they settled on in the end? The main hall, where the exam should have been. And on top of that, they were playing bench ball that lesson. That's fine, but the problem is, all the benches were in the sports hall. So they couldn't go into the sports hall and get the benches because of the ongoing exam. So instead of deciding to play a different game, they settled on setting up cones and using those as a replacement for the bench. You ever tried playing bench ball on cones? Number 3. In June, School X set up these extra revision sessions for the Year 11s. Now, you would have thought these would be during, like, break and lunch, but apparently some of them, at least, must have been during regular lessons for some reason. And because of that, that resulted in the other students' lessons having to be moved to other classrooms. I don't know why the Year 11 sessions couldn't just be in an unused classroom, but the problem was the rest of the school, who had lessons in the rooms where the Year 11s were now revising, had no idea where their lessons were being re-roomed to until they arrived for their regular session. So they turn up for the regular lesson, and then they find out, oh, okay, we're actually in this other room, let's go there. School X did try to prepare for this. In the mornings, they were supposed to send out this list of all the re-rooms, but they didn't do that for at least 2 weeks. It's good going there. And I think surely by that point, after those 2 weeks were up, the Year 11 revision sessions would have ended. Because by that point, they would have done most, if not all, of their exams and gone on study leave. A star to School X, or 9, or whatever it is on the new system. Then finally, number 4, this was in late June. A Year 10 science class were told on a Friday they were going to be having a test on the following Tuesday. Students went home that Friday thinking the test was going to be on Tuesday. However, after school, the teacher who set the test was then told that apparently there was going to be an Ofsted inspection on the Tuesday, and for some reason that meant he couldn't do the test on the Tuesday. So the date of the test had to change. The date of the test was changed to a Monday afternoon lesson, which was originally going to be revision for the test. Now, because it was the weekend, the students didn't find out about this change until they got there on the Monday afternoon. So they turned up on the Monday afternoon thinking they were going to be having a revision session, only to find out the test date had been changed, and that they were going to be doing the test there and then instead. And then on top of that, the Tuesday inspection, it wasn't Ofsted, like they said, it was just 2 regular teachers. So when it comes to rescheduling things, School X don't exactly do a good job of getting the word out about it. So that's something to improve on going forward, I think. We got this article on May the 28th from the local newspaper. It was something from the CEO of School X. He was saying that the District Council should congratulate School X for investing in the schools in this town. And as part of his reasoning for this, he proudly mentioned demolishing a third of School B. We're a year on from your takeover, mate, and I still see next to no reason why you should be congratulated. Don't see how demolishing a third of a school is going to improve it. I don't see how needlessly swapping school rooms around is going to improve it. I don't see how bringing in all these strict rules and punishments has improved it. All you've done is you've just made them worse. I also don't see how merging 2 secondary schools into one, leaving only 1 secondary school and a grammar school around, thus giving the Year 6s who didn't take or pass the 11 plus only 1 choice, I honestly don't see how that's an improvement. So June the 15th was the last day of the school year for the Year 11s. After that they just go on study leave, and then when they finish their exams they're done. Now I don't know for sure if they have this big leavers presentation assembly thing. School A had it. I remember my leavers assembly when they put the Get to Know Me tag video up. But School A also allowed the Year 11s to dress up. They let them have silly string, and they basically gave the Year 11s free roam of the field. So they basically have this really fun day. School X slightly ruined this fun. They still let them dress up. Like I said, I don't know for sure if they still have the leavers assembly, but they definitely did ban silly string and water guns, and if anybody was caught with them they'd be confiscated. So that ruined a little bit of the fun, but at least they still got to dress up and they still got free roam of the field. But what I found funny about this was one of the costume choices from a bunch of the students. It was mainly a group of girls. They purposely dressed up in the old School A uniform, skirts and tights included, or shorts in the case of the boys who did this, in the process basically giving School X a massive middle finger. If anyone who did that is watching, I approve. There's not really too much I can say about Sports Day, to be honest. I mean, it's something not everybody really enjoys. My sister definitely didn't enjoy it. She didn't take part in it this year, so I don't have too much to go off for this. But when I first heard they were going to be doing Sports Day, my first thought was, they've got School A and School B, they're officially supposed to be the same school now. How exactly are they going to do Sports Day? Are they just going to have individual sports days at each site? Are they going to bring the participating students from one school to the other for the day? But no, they decided to do something else completely different, something I never would have expected. They held Sports Day in this small stadium in a completely different town. Of course, in their articles about it, they were saying everybody had loved it and it was a really great experience. But the first comment from one of the students who took part to the French teacher when he returned, it was S-word. I think that alone should kind of summarise it. So School X, in July, they had these transition days. So basically the students who were going to be going from School A to School B for the next year, or vice versa, they basically go over to that school for just one day and they just get to see what it's like there, basically. Kind of like an induction day. Firstly, for some reason, Year 7's got 2 transition days, everybody else only got 1. No idea why that was the case, it just was. But then on July 12th, that was the Year 10 transition day. That was the day my sister went over to School B. She went there with a friend. She and a friend came back here afterwards. Her friend said they ate lunch in a cage. No, I'm not making that up. She genuinely said that they ate lunch in a cage. By cage, I imagine she's probably referring to all the fencing that's around the place. If you need further evidence that schools make the kids feel like they're in prison, there you go. They gave out a map to everybody. That map had the quad labelled as a playground. It's not a playground, it's a quad. Please call it what it is. The map also showed the names of the different rooms. But what I noticed was each block was missing an I room. What I mean by that is they were labelled like 1A, 1B, 1C, all the way up to 1K. And it's the same for not just Block 1, but Block 2, Block 3, Block 4, Block 5, and I think Block 6 as well they go up to. They're each labelled in a similar manner. But I noticed each of them were missing an I room. So there wasn't a 1I, or a 2I, a 3I, a 4I. And at first I thought, did they just label the map wrong? But then at the start of this year, when my sister got a new planner, which actually did have the Academy Maps page in it, sure enough, on there, the I rooms apparently still don't exist. So for some reason, each block is missing an I room. I have no idea why that is. Could it be that School X just don't know the alphabet? Given that they don't know how to count to 9 properly, I wouldn't be surprised. Here's something completely pointless that they did. They moved the French lessons into the college building, and they changed the French rooms to English ones. I have no idea what purpose that served. Now, my final point, an English assignment my sister got set for homework. And what was that assignment? Well, as you can see now, she had to write about whether she thought the UK should retain nuclear capability or not. Now, believe it or not, my sister doesn't know anything about nuclear weaponry, so she would have had to research it. But because she also had art homework at the time, the art homework was going to take longer and it was due first, she decided to do her art homework, and I volunteered to do the nuclear weapons research for her. Because, believe it or not, I also don't know anything about nuclear weapons, or at least I didn't before this. As part of this assignment, she would have had to research what the UK's nuclear weaponry actually was like at the time. She would have had to research the different opinions of various people, and then using the facts about the UK's nuclear weaponry and different people's different opinions on it, she would then have to write about her own conclusion. And if you didn't know, researching nuclear weapons can get you landed on government watch lists. If you research it extensively or research it often, that's probably going to get you moved higher up the list. I don't know if this is still the case now, but thanks to School X, I've been on a government watch list for researching nuclear weapons for my sister's English homework. Thanks so very much, School X. I imagine a lot of my sister's English group also don't really know anything about nuclear weapons and might have also had to research this themselves too, meaning they may also have ended up on the same government watch list as me. So there you go. A School X teacher got her English class, landed on a government watch list, researching nuclear weapons for homework. I mean, the teacher could have chosen any topic and she went with nuclear weaponry. So, in conclusion, School X have changed things across both schools A and B massively, but overall the bad far outweighs the good. I've barely had any positives to talk about. School X have just taken massive steps backwards. School A in particular is no longer recognisable to me. I'm sure School X's intention is for the students to get high GCSE grades, but not only do GCSE grades ultimately mean nothing at the end of the day, the length School X have gone to make this a reality is just ridiculous. Something that I probably should clarify, everything I've talked about in this video, it's how I've interpreted the information that I've got. It's fine if you disagree with what I say. I've just simply talked about what I believe is just a huge mistake and my reasons for believing that. Also remember, the last time I was at School A full time was in 2016. And like I said, most of the information for this video has come from my sister, who still did go there until the end of last year, along with various articles, most of which are from the local newspaper. With this whole situation, I'm basically an outsider looking in. Apparently, I seem to care more than the students who are actually affected by the lies, stupidity and incompetence of School X. And again, like I said at the start, I have no reason to doubt what my sister's told me. She'd gain nothing from making anything up. And again, like I said, she'd risk being put into isolation or maybe even being excluded for it. I've done my absolute best to make sure everything I said in this video is correct and up to date. It's entirely possible that I've interpreted something incorrectly. It's entirely possible that there's something that I've missed. If that's the case, feel free to let me know. If there's something that I do need to correct, until I inevitably make a follow-up video, I'll address any corrections in a comment on this video. If anybody watching this is aware of who I mean by School A, School B, School X, etc., and if you want to get in touch with me regarding your own experiences with them, the best place to do that will be my Twitter, linked in the description, or the channel Instagram, which is also linked in the description. If you happen to be a student at one of the School X owned schools, and you agree with what I say and you disagree with what School X have been doing, I encourage you to speak up and make your voice heard about things like this. And you can do that in pretty much any way you want. You can make your own group similar to Dumbledore's army, make your own videos like this one, tell your parents and your friends, start petitions if you want, maybe even contact the local news. I'll be honest, I'm genuinely considering sending this to the local news. And if you're not comfortable with speaking up, then just sharing this video could help. Sharing other stuff that other people have spoken up about can help as well. Because if we don't speak up at all, School X is just going to keep continuing to get away with all the ridiculous things they do, and they'll just continue doing it. If there's somebody from School X who happens to be watching this, feel free to make a response, see if you can dismantle any of my arguments or correct me when needed. If you make a response to me, then I'll make a response to your response to me. And just as a preemptive, remember that I have the right of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. I'm perfectly in my right to say that I don't like you, especially when I've got something to back it up with. And as a preemptive word of warning, I'm not suggesting you've done this before, it's just something that some big companies and big YouTubers tend to do when they're called out. Don't respond to this by threatening to take down this video or this channel or anything along those lines. Because not only is filing false takedowns illegal, but I'd rather try and keep this as civil as possible. But if you just ignore my warning and take that path anyway, then I will fight back. What I want out of this is either 1, you leave and never come back, or 2, you listen to the criticisms in this video and use those as a basis to improve going forward. I mean, your mission statement says, you will adopt a philosophy of continuous improvement in every aspect of the Academy's work and life. So you want to continuously improve, so listen to my criticisms and use those as a basis to improve. Follow through with your own mission statement. Listen to the criticisms, don't ignore them, and don't kick out the students who criticise you fairly. Also, School X, if you do make a response, bonus points if you do a diss track at the end. That's going to do it for the rant portion of this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you've made it to this point in the video. I don't even know how long this video is going to end up being. I spent about 10 hours recording everything. That's going to be so much fun to edit. Special thanks goes to both Jack and my sister for all their help, because without them, this video definitely wouldn't have happened. So, let's have us a bit of fun, shall we? To close out this video, and to make it a true rip-off of the Asian Jake Paul content cop, Here's a diss track on School X.
Big up Jack and the Cam. Big up Savage on the Beat, link in description. At Callywally19 on Twitter. Yeah, School X, you are the main suspects. Let's not make this complex. Your CEO sure could flex. You get 180k a year, but your students are in tears. All the parents are in fear of what you'll change throughout the year. In '02, your CEO went on holiday when GCSEs began in just a few days. When a student does that, you make them pay. What made you think that was okay? Let's not forget the planners failed with term dates, contents and calendars, and you had the cheek to blame their printers. But I've got more to say on you busters. I wanted the uniform, right? And it's skinny trousers, skirts and tights, hair gel, makeup and tip X2. What bad things do you think they're gonna do? Listen mate, your clothing does not affect your learning, so stop threatening students by isolating them. Then we have the school A trees. It was cutting them down a breeze. You had no reason to get rid of those leaves, especially the one that was used to grieve. Here's 3 of your smaller mistakes: mixing up names and dates, making a one-way corridor, holding mock exams in the sports hall. There's also the school B sign, where you didn't correct the poor design. How long was spent trying to fix that dent? Oh, and where have the old teachers been sent? You really were so off your rockers when it came to refunding for the lockers. You paid for gift cards when you could have given cash, and the excuses you gave were complete trash. There really is more that I could say, but I'll save it all for another day. So I'll leave you on the playground to listen to the rest of this sick sound. Not trying to be rude, School X. Just want some explanations. Love it if you could reply. Callywally19 out.
All the credits for this video are down below. Please consider liking and subscribing to support the channel.